get started. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. Welcome to our Collabinar at the Center for Community and Citizen Science. I am the director of that research organization. I'll just let you know that if you are new to the Center for Community and Citizen Science, we are a research center based at the UC Davis School of Education, and our mission is to help scientists and communities collaborate on science to address environmental issues. So we do research on that, we do capacity building, we partner widely, and we're excited to have one of those partners here today. Thanks for being here, Dena. One thing we'd like is if you're online, we'd love to know about who's online and who's participating today. So if you would just, in the chat, please just do a quick intro of yourself by sharing your name, position, or title, or organization, or other relevant affiliation. That would be great. And at this point, I will pass things over to Kelsey. Who's going to give us a little more context for the Collabinar. Thank you. Kelsey.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Hi, Kelsey.
Hi. Okay, sorry. I'm a little bit in a loud place right now because I have work being done at my house. But we wanted to, are we ready to introduce Dena? Yes. Or are we talking more about, okay, perfect. So basically, Dena Spatz is the Biodiversity Coordinator with CDFW. She works alongside agency, nonprofit tribes, and academics to bring together and distribute information to help conserve the state's biodiversity. She works with CDFW Science Institute, where she serves as a liaison with the California Biodiversity Network and the California 30x30 team, is helping establish long-term biodiversity monitoring through the Sentinel Site Network, and organizes the state's annual Biodiversity Day, which includes scaling community science participation in biodiversity science and conservation. She received her PhD at UC Santa Cruz in the Conservation Action Lab within the Ecology and Evolutionary Biology department. Thank you so much for coming, Dena. We're so excited to have you here to discuss your amazing project.
All right, well, thanks for having me here today. Can folks hear me okay?
Yeah, folks online.
Good.
And before you get started, I just wanted to give a little background about the Collabinar so we can kind of get on the same page on how it's all gonna go down. So hello everyone, I'm Sarah Angulo. I'm currently the Community Education and Outreach Specialist here at the center. Thanks Kelsey also, who introduced Dena. She's our intern for the communications work here at the center as well. And so about our Collabinars quickly, they invite colleagues from all over the globe to present their most exciting developments and challenges in the field of community and citizen science. Attending the Collabinar today, as you can see coming through the chat, are people who engage with community and citizen science at different levels. So this 1 hour session aims to foster an environment of mutual learning. So it's actually a less of a formally structured webinar as it is a discussion on the topic or project brought to us by our presenter today. So throughout our time together, we'll monitor the chat where you can post your thoughts and questions, but we'll answer anything pressing like as we go along for clarification, but big discussion questions we'll save for the end so that we can kind of have a little bit of a space to really get into some thoughts and sharing and problem solving and pondering of this field as a whole. Okay, so now with that, sorry, we will pass it over to Dena to present the California Biodiversity Day.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. And so I guess I'll talk for like 20 to 30 minutes.
Perfect.
Yeah, and then we can discuss.
Yeah.
So thanks for having me again. My name is Dena Spatz, and just a quick kind of roadmap for what I'm going to be covering. Just quickly, some background on biodiversity and biodiversity loss and what we are aiming to achieve in addressing that. Specifically, being from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, I'd like to talk about community science and what we're doing there, and specifically about California Biodiversity Day, which is something ongoing right now, and I would like everyone to know about. So just really big picture, what is biodiversity? It is the variety of life on Earth, from the bacteria to redwood trees and whales. It is this biodiversity that makes up the iconic landscapes of California. That is also due to the varied geography of California. We have the highest and lowest elevations in all the continental US, as well as oceans, and so all these things create different microclimates and habitats that then foster amazing biodiversity found nowhere else. And what's also amazing about biodiversity is when in resilient form, it helps buffer the effects of climate change. So it's important also for people and nature together. Many of you probably know this, but California is considered a global biodiversity hotspot. I think it was ranked, 8th around the world for the California floristic province specifically because of California's plants. 30% of California's plants are found nowhere else on the planet other than in California. But the reason why it has this biodiversity hotspot is both because of that reason, as well as because there's been over 70% loss of natural habitat in the state. So that's what these global biodiversity hotspots are. It's both a call to the importance of biodiversity and its loss in the same place and sort of call to action. What's also just important to know is California is a national biodiversity hotspot. You can see that by the dark brown part of California on the screen. There are over 1,000 vertebrate species, 65% are endemic in the state, lots and lots of insects. But as you can imagine, about 33% of California species are rare or at risk. Some of you may have seen this map and came out in 2022 by the New York Times. I think it just puts it in perspective where California stands on the national scale in terms of biodiversity loss. So those really dark red colors are where biodiversity is in decline. You can see it's happening throughout the state. So just some general threats to biodiversity. Obviously, climate change is a hot topic, but things that have been happening up until now have really been driving biodiversity loss, so specifically habitat loss and invasive species. And by that, I mean non-native species that have been brought to California by people and that harm the incipient ecosystems where they've been released. But the good news is that there can be really effective means to stop these threats and prevent biodiversity losses. And what I really want to highlight in this slide is that doing these efforts takes everyone, not just career scientists or managers, but the public in general, helping to make these actions happen to reverse biodiversity losses and restore ecosystems. So in response to that, the state has done some interesting things in the less than 10 years at this point, but in 2018, Governor Brown at the time signed the first biodiversity initiative, and that has since been followed up by the California 30 by 30 initiative, which aims to conserve 30% of California land and waters by 2030. And including that target, there are key objectives. So that is to protect and restore biodiversity, to mitigate and build resilience to climate change, and expand access to nature. And these sort of actions, objectives are spelled out in this strategies document called Pathways to 30 by 30, where there's 10 different pathways to achieve these goals. Not all actions are going to make an area considered to be like a 30 by 30 conservation area, but still conservation is important in other ways. So that's what these different pathways describe. And so specifically, I wanted to point out here, there's pathway 10 to evaluate conservation outcomes and adaptively manage. And there's many actions within that pathway, but specifically for this group, there's action 10.5, which is to leverage community science in environmental monitoring and to build capacity for community science monitoring in historically marginalized and tribal communities. So these are really important actions for achieving 30 by 30, and obviously is a big focus of the center here at UC Davis as well. So community science, I'm assuming most people on the call know about what this is, but just the general participation of the public in collecting information that is used for conservation purposes. And for the rest of this talk, I will be talking about the different ways in which the Department of Fish and Wildlife is doing community science. And so just quickly, we are CDFW, and the mission is to manage California's diverse fish, wildlife, and plant resources and the habitats upon which they depend for their ecological values and for their use and enjoyment by the public. So community science really fits squarely within this mission. So like I said, I'll just walk through some examples of what CDFW is doing. There's a lot, and it's not all going to be on the screen, but just some examples are bighorn sheep surveys that volunteers can participate in to do. There's been a number of different kind of raptor species surveys over the years. A lot of that data lives in the Avian Knowledge Network database, so it's publicly available. Another example is our Bobcat program. They have put camera traps across the state to look for bobcats, and then volunteers can help process that data and inform where bobcats are. On the marine side, we work with the MPA collaboratives and to do different fisheries assessments where we engage with anglers to do interviews about what fish they're catching, and that information is fed into important repositories to help us understand how our fish communities are doing. It helps us manage them better. There's also wildlife health reporting. Probably lots of you have engaged with wildlife you may have encountered anywhere, and you can report that sick or dead wildlife on this database, and that's obviously a really important way for CDFW to track disease throughout the state. And many, many more examples are out there as well. But I thought I would also now dive into a couple that are happening right now that really anyone anywhere in California can participate in, and that's through our collaborative pollinator program. It's run by Dr. Hilary Sardinias, who's the pollinator coordinator. And as you can see from the sort of flower arrangement, that collaboration is at the center. And I'll walk through a couple of examples of where that is happening with community science efforts. So first is with the California Bumblebee Atlas, which is a multi-partner effort to track pollinator populations across the state, and specifically because many are thought to be in decline. So this project tracks the state's bumblebees, it measures population baselines, and helps CDFW and partners prioritize area to target declining species, and helps with management overall. What's exciting about this is it started in 2022, I believe. It's still ongoing. And volunteers have collected information on over 10,000 bumblebee species and the plants they've been foraging on since that time. The survey period is still open for 2024. I believe it might end at the end of this month, but you can get involved either way. If you visit the website on the screen, just take some very quick trainings and then can be on your way. So check out the website and see when there will be the next training in your area. Another fun and exciting pollinator effort is through the Monarch Genomics Project. This is a multi-partner effort to understand where monarchs are coming and going from and what they're eating. So this is a collaboration with CDFW, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and a bunch of universities. Basically how this works is dead monarchs are collected, they're frozen, they're first sent to Colorado State University for genomic analysis. Then specimens are sent here to UC Davis for analysis that's going to help us figure out where those monarchs originated. And then finally, they go out to UBC, where researchers determine which milkweed species the monarchs use. So combined, all this information can help us better conserve monarchs. And with it, like the Bumblebee Atlas, you can participate. You go to this website, you watch some quick videos, and get added to the permit, and then be on your way and help collect these dead monarchs that you might come across, which many of us tend to do. So you can be a community scientist for this project as well. And the last, yes, there we go. The last major way in which we're engaging, not the last, but the one that I'm kind of going to land on for the rest of the talk, is through working with iNaturalist. And many folks here are probably already familiar with it. There's the what's it called? The one that you organize? City Nature Challenge, thank you. Of course. That happens across the state that leverages this tool. But generally, this app is it's an app that's used to upload and ID nature observations and sort of see what for yourself what you're observing. It's pretty easy to participate in using iNaturalist. You do have to sign in, you find or photograph nature around you, you upload it to the app, and through that you can use AI to ID what you're observing. So it's this really awesome, very fast, real-time way to learn about what you're seeing. And then once it's submitted to the app, the community that's on iNaturalist, made up of hobbyists and experts, can go out and verify these observations to make them research grade. And once they're there, others can use that data for science and management purposes. So it's really important that it goes through this process. And for California alone, there are over 35,000 species observations on that platform, made by over 300,000 people and growing. So because of this, CDFW is very interested in being able to actually intake the community collected data that into our state database systems. And so I just wanted to share there's a really exciting advancement happening within CDFW with a partnership with Cal Academy of Sciences, where iNat actually originally came from, and iNaturalists themselves, to figure out how to leverage the data and build workflows to go from that platform into our databases, specifically into the California Natural Diversity Database, CNDDB. Also, BIOS is another area, another main database where we put biodiversity information. And so with that, in those spaces, it can then help inform other conservation databases like Areas of Conservation Emphasis, or ACE. And what's really important is these databases are what feed into 30 by 30 CA Nature platforms. So if we can get that information into iNaturalist, it can go all the way up into those platforms as well that help inform the entire 30 by 30 initiative. So really excited about that. Real quick, actually, before I go forward, this is also exciting because it would be the first state collaboration to do this in the United States. I believe this has happened elsewhere. So it'll create this really awesome model for doing this in other states, and hopefully be able to really leverage iNaturalist information at US scale for management purposes. So there's lots of examples of how to use information from iNaturalist, and I thought I would step through some examples that CDFW is using. So just first, I mentioned the CNDDB. There's actually a collection project within that you can join. And by doing that, any rare species observations automatically collates into this collection project. By joining it, you're sort of allowing CDFW to know who you are. That way they can reach out to you, because that data ends up being obscured. And so the part of this workflow is figuring out how to unobscure the data so CDFW knows where these species are and can better understand how to manage it. I believe that this project might also be the first line of information that is trialed to get into the iNaturalist project. So go ahead and join this project. It's just a way for the information that you have on iNaturalist to sort of continue into these other spaces and be seen.
Can I just ask really quick?
Yeah.
Does it not pull from data that is being, like, if anyone sees that rare species, it gets pulled into the project, or you have to actually designate the project?
No, you know what? Any of the information is going to be in iNaturalist, and we can access that. No problem. This is just a way to be like, I'm okay being contacted. I'm sharing with you that this is something that I've observed, and it just allows for open communication. I'm sure there's other reasons too. I don't manage this project, but that's just an important way to make sure your observation has been seen. And they check this collection project, but also just generally, if you observe a rare or endangered species, it gets automatically flagged by iNaturalist and obscured, because we want to make sure that species remains protected.
I was thinking too, I know working with students and stuff, we will do more of the general area, so we won't pin the school.
Yeah.
But we'll do a 2-mile range that iNat goes out to. And so if I go to that database, does that then mean that pinpoint will be exact for this project, or does it stay whatever the setting was in iNat? It stays
obscured.
Okay.
Yeah. If you've obscured your data, it stays obscured. But this is part of what they're trying to figure out is, okay, so what does that mean when we're trying to understand where species occur, so we can make management decisions about it? It's a process to figure out, but it's possible you'd be contacted by CDFW to say, hey, we know you have this obscure data, would you be willing to share it? And so you can, it's kind of opening up the conversation.
Yeah, no, that's huge.
Yeah.
So we have a note from an iNaturalist staff member, Tony. When you join the project, you can choose to share the true locations of your observations with the project. So those true locations can be seen by the project owners.
All right, very good.
That's pretty
Thank
cool.
you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah. Some other sort of fun ways to participate in ways, things that CDFW is involved with we created a California Pollinators Hub. So any pollinators that have ever been observed on iNaturalist, you can find in this one collection project, just making it easier to access. But CDFW and partners are also mining iNaturalist for pollinator information to inform the Great Sunflower Project, the Western Monarch Milkweed Mapper, having a better sense of where our pollinators are and what habitats they're using. Another way that we are using iNaturalist and would like to use it more so in the future is for our CDFW land. So the department manages over 1 million acres across the state through wildlife areas and ecological reserves. Our species list from these sites, some of them are out of date, and a lot of them can be informed by people having visited these sites and using iNaturalist. So we're figuring out ways that we can leverage those species lists and make them public, because it also allows for people to look and say, oh, this is what I can see this week by checking it out on iNaturalist, or if we can bring it into our websites, we can do it that way too. That's all in progress. Another project CDFW is working on, and actually the UC reserves and other landowners are doing this too, is establishing a climate biodiversity Sentinel Site Network. We are in our second year of deploying monitoring and climate equipment across our properties, and we're trying to figure out ways in which we can leverage community collected data to inform biodiversity at these sites. So we created a collection project on iNaturalist. This is a sort of a nascent project, and we'd be happy to have this be part of the conversation later if it comes up too, of different ways that we can incorporate public data into this project. Here I'm showing observation of a beaver in Sacramento, and the reason why I'm putting this here is because CDFW scientists in the new beaver restoration program are mining iNat for beaver locations, beaver observations to help inform our mapping efforts to understand where are beavers across the state. And that's really going to help us understand where restoration can happen with these species. It's become a really important keystone species in a lot of ecosystems that we've been focused on. And then lastly that I wanted to point out is the California Biodiversity Day. So I'll walk through what that is and how you can participate. So just for some background, Biodiversity Day started in 2018 with that signing of the first biodiversity initiative by Governor Brown. He signed that on September 7th, 2018, and forevermore, California Biodiversity Day is on that day. Since that time, California 30 by 30 has played a major role in uplifting and participating in California Biodiversity Day. And it's really happens through a 10-day action week that covers 2 weekends. This is to make the event more accessible and inclusive so that we're not just celebrating biodiversity on 1 day a year, but creating opportunities for action throughout a 10-day action week. And I've listed our planning partners at the bottom of the screen, because this really couldn't happen without really major assistance by both nonprofits and agencies, UC system as well, to get these Biodiversity Day activities out there. So just our goals generally for Biodiversity Day, first is really connecting communities to biodiversity and conservation efforts at a really foundational and fundamental level. What is biodiversity, period, is a really important thing we're still trying to communicate. Second is to increase nature discovery through community science and other activities as well that I'll share in a minute. And then with regard to the activities, increasing outreach, participation, and diversity of folks that are engaging with California Biodiversity Days. Our goals every single year is to increase that. That's increasing California NGOs that are participating, regional agencies, tribes, and as well improving access to CDFW wildlife areas, because much of the public don't know that they exist, and they're open for people to explore. Okay, so California Biodiversity Day is coming soon, September 7th through 15th. We have a website, which you can type in at that bit.ly link, and it might end up in the chat. There's also a QR code up at the top for, oh, thank you. Yeah, we'll get that in the chat, and a QR code at the top. What's really exciting is we had the goal, last year we had about 100 events. Our goal this year was 130. Actually, we're at 190 now, and we're just thrilled about this. So it's over 180 events. Each dot here represents a different location. State Parks has been a major partner in putting these on, so there's
Tons of projects
There's,
by state
there's
parks.
tons
on,
of projects,
on
yeah. I have
Part-time.
about 90 different events across about 60 state parks, not an exact number, but they're a major partner in doing this, but so are a lot of other groups across the state. So it's happening at 120 different locations. From these, we have 17 virtual events. Those are those dark green dots and some of the purple dots as well. So just some examples of what these are. CDFW, we're putting on a webinar about urban biodiversity on the 11th of September during Biodiversity Week. The Natural Resource Agency is going to be talking about 30 by 30 through their speaker series. There's also the Department of Food and Ag is putting out a webinar. And then other ways that we're doing virtual events is collaborating with state parks with their Portscast. What this is basically a live stream from the state park. And it's really aimed to educators and students so that you can sign up, you can go to their calendar and find a time that works for you and come in live and watch them kind of show you around the state park, which is pretty exciting. But the main activities that are really happening throughout the state, and that's most of these green dots, are bioblitzes, which are essentially looking for the biodiversity within a certain place and time and collecting that information in iNaturalist, birding events, especially using eBird, and restoration activities. And this year we also have some cultural activities added, like basket weaving, having down in the desert, some storytelling, and walks happening on the North Coast. And we'd really like to increase these kinds of activities in future years as well. So thought I'd point out events in the Sacramento region. There are at least 25 of them.
I just added another one this morning,
Oh,
but it has not populated. I just checked the site. It
okay.
hasn't populated yet.
You can still add events.
Yes, I'm
Well, that's great. We're super excited. So just some examples. I'm just putting them up on the screen. I'm not going to walk through all of them, but we've got bioblitzes, we've got birding events, we've got some bat watching events, which is really exciting, both at Yolo Bypass and the Cosumnes River Preserve, and some restoration activities, for example, in Woodland at the regional park there. So really exciting. There's a lot of engagement here. And then another really important piece of California Biodiversity Day is this Find 30 Species Challenge. This started up, I want to say, about 3 years ago. It was some creativity by the 30 by 30 team in Cal Academy to consider ways that anyone anywhere in California can participate. You don't have to go to an event. You can literally be at your house or at your school or wherever to participate. It is an iNaturalist-based activity, so that has some limitations for kids. But other than that, the idea here is download the iNat app on your phone, make an account, it's free. You have to join this challenge. And we're making it so you do have to join as opposed to just collecting all of observations, because we want to know who's participating. We want to actively see how many people are actively signed on and documenting biodiversity for this challenge. And then we can also say who would win these challenges as well. So anywhere in California between the 7th and the 15th, the idea is observe, photograph, upload at least 30 species in California. And you know, some people take a couple days to upload their observations that happen between those dates. So there's definitely some wiggle room to get your observations uploaded over the week after that. The observations are supposed to be made during that time period. So I recommend folks join this if they can. It should be fun. Another exciting thing is we are engaged with eBird to create birding for Biodiversity Day opportunities. California has more birders than anywhere else on the planet. And there's a lot that they can contribute to our knowledge of bird biodiversity. There isn't, that I know of, like a September survey of birds across the state. You know, there's a Christmas bird count and there's a couple of other ones. We don't know that much about the snapshot of birds in September. So we're really excited to get birders involved. If you use eBird, the idea is you can share your checklist with the profile called California Biodiversity Day, just like you would with someone else you're going birding with. If you do that, then it'll show up on a statewide trip report where we can see what's being observed, and we hope to do this in future years too. This is our first year doing this. Okay, so what are the different ways you can get involved? This is sort of a summary here. One is you can host an event. There's a form that's still open on our website. You can just click to add to it. We do have, like, at this point, almost 200 events on there. So really where we're moving to is figuring out how you can support events. If you see something that's local and you're on social media, share about it, tell your friends, go to the event if you can and participate. If you want to actually help with one, you can always reach out to me or the event host, and lots of people are happy to take support to do these. These are grassroots events that are happening on local scales, so that's pretty exciting. The other way is to join that self-led biodiversity challenge. Better yet, if you are an iNaturalist expert and you know about biodiversity and can help identify those observations that have been made, that's really important for making them go from casual observations to research-grade observations. So I'm encouraging folks to go back and do that as well. Go birding, of course, is another way you can participate. You don't have to put an event on the website to do that. Just enjoy. And then lastly, again, we're amplifying biodiversity itself and conservation actions anyone can take. Your newsletters, your website, social media, however you can. Because the idea is, again, connecting people to biodiversity and what it is and what we can do to conserve it. Lastly, to do all these things, we have these public toolkits available that provides resources on how to do all the things I just listed. I don't expect everyone to know about each and every one of those things, but there's also these really cool pollinator fact sheets that a group of us put together, and they're at the regional level. And we just put together some educator resources as well that we're super excited about. So like I mentioned, all the data that's being collected can feed into these various projects. We don't have a specific biodiversity data research question or project other than helping inform other things that we know about, as well as for California 30 by 30. And so this collaboration is really critical for using that information to inform those 30 by 30 efforts. So yeah, just in summary, we went through what is biodiversity and biodiversity loss, and that there's really tangible ways that we can reverse biodiversity decline through community science. And I hope that you all learned a bit about California Biodiversity Day, and I'm happy to discuss.
Excellent.
We do have some questions to sort of get the juices flowing for thinking about the power of iNaturalist and how the department can work to leverage the iNaturalist data. Like connecting the actual data that people collect to scientists doing conservation work and research. Like how do we bridge that gap, or what's going on in CDFW right now that sort of connects the data and the people together. We also have, we covered a bit about the Biodiversity Day and how we can participate. And then how do we reach broader audiences and better leverage the collected data for visualizations and public use. So
these are discussion questions for the group.
Yes, those were what we decided in advance to launch us into our discussion period. So if there are thoughts on those or additional questions, you can start the discussion here.
It seems like you have those written somewhere, Sarah, that I can put them into the chat.
Sure.
That'd be good. Do you want to put them at the top of the notes? Or?
Put them in the chat right now.
And also, I saw just from the people that are online participating and people that have visited, there's some particular interests that people might have questions to discuss things about iNaturalist and CDFW as well. Since we have a ringer group of people interested in things, so that we have good questions as well.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you are thinking about, well, first of all, I'm so impressed with just the array of stuff. I mean, both within Biodiversity Day, but then all the other community science things that CDFW is a part of or pushing forward. And so I'm curious about how you think about all the different kinds of folks who are going to come in contact with CDFW through participation in these really different engagement and data generating activities. And I'm asking this because we've talked a little bit about this in the context of marine protected areas with Ocean Protection Council and CDFW and other partners. You've got students in the tide pools gathering data, you've got anglers on the commercial passenger fishing vessel doing the surveys with scientists, et cetera. They come in contact with an individual project and they feel connected to that project. But it's, at least in that case, it's all about marine protected areas. And so how do they how do you think about the connection to marine protected areas and the fact that you're part of a lot of different kinds of community scientists, all part of a larger project? I'm wondering if there's any potential in this stuff for that, where like my participation is not just about this thing, but a broader goal.
Definitely, and really like any data that's collected by CFW needs to eventually feed into those databases like BIOS, and if it's rare species into CNDDB. And those are our primary places where we take information to make conservation decisions. So I mean, there's obviously already connectivity, but it's definitely not maybe not well communicated.
Like the partners know it, but do the participants
Right.
know?
I don't know. I mean, people often say like, well, why should I participate? Well, it's just thinking about like the iNaturalist biodiversity that I'm doing. Well, what does it matter that I'm doing this? Why should I use iNat versus say Seek, where I can just figure out what it is but not make a contribution? So that's what I was like hoping, that I showed in the slides. These collaborations are super important for informing conservation decisions, but how can we better communicate that? I think is the question.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if you're interested, because that's what we like to talk about, right? Around here, so I was just thinking like, do you have sort of saying to people, your stuff goes into a database, is sort of like, and then what happens to it, right? And so one of the things Julia Parrish talks about is having data stories, right? So if you can tell people in one sentence or maybe two about a question that got answered using those databases, or like one of those databases, or a management decision that drew on particular species or a particular location, geographic area, where like a management decision got informed by one of those databases, like really specific little nuggets is what I think would really draw people in. Beyond saying, I mean, cause like I just, preached the gospel of iNaturalist to a whole bunch of people in the Olympic Peninsula over the weekend, and it was like, and it goes into a database, and they're like, and then what, right? And I was like, well, I personally know a lot of people who use that data to do research and answer questions, but kind of didn't have that data story to kind of get over the line, and so that might be helpful.
Absolutely. Actually, at iNaturalist themselves, they have a newsletter that they put out monthly or so, and I love it because they pull out some examples of what was observed and how it was used for different purposes, like rediscovering a cicada in California that we didn't know existed. I mean, that's incredible. Or talking about different things that have been observed and how it impacts conservation. And I think they do a good job of summarizing those things, but we could do a better job of doing that as well.
Sharing.
Yeah, like the hows, not just the what's. Yeah.
We do have a question in the chat about Biodiversity Day specifically. If people are hosting events, but they are private closed events, how do you want them shared on that site? And if so, how?
It's totally up to you how you want to share it, or if not. If there are a couple closed events that are on the website, but I think as long as you're talking about biodiversity and you're uplifting it to your audiences, it doesn't really matter if it goes on the website or not. I mean, there's a ton more activities happening than what's on there as well.
I'm curious how CDFW generally, or maybe also you personally, evaluate. I mean, clearly community science is now like a big part of the strategy related to 30 by 30, Biodiversity Day, all these various things. How are you evaluating the success of it?
Yeah.
With respect to what the agency is trying to accomplish in the world?
Yeah, I think about this a lot and like what are our data metrics? Just in one sense of that, using iNaturalist for us is a really important way to measure success because we're talking about people participating on the ground in these events, and these are again local grassroots events. I don't know what's going on or how many people actually show up to that. Like, what is the participation rate? So for one, anyone using iNaturalist and sharing that information with their, with either joining the challenge or creating their own collection projects. And we have an umbrella page so we can see where all the different places are collecting information. That is a huge way that we can measure change over time. So not just how many projects there are, but how many people are participating in them. This is like at a human level, you know, like what's our reach? The other way is through the number of events that we do have. So that's why it's like, well, I would love to know if you're hosting an event so I can understand how far are we reaching and what kind of event is that. We really wanted to engage more with tribes this year. I mean, not just this year, but always, and figure out new ways to communicate and learn about what does biodiversity mean to you. But if I don't know about the things that people are doing, then I can't know where it went. So that's where entering your information on the website is important, but of course you don't have to do that. When it comes to the larger scale questions about biodiversity and conservation, this is really why this collaboration with iNaturalist is so important, because at this stage, I mean, you can download data from iNaturalist easily, you know, and plug it in. But having this workflow in place will, I think, significantly change the way that we can talk about these projects, and we can improve them as well. Like we can have more targeted research questions. We can do a lot more with it once we can more easily get that information into our data systems, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it just opens up all kinds of questions, some of which are way more accessible because it's just there in the data, and others are kind of lurking a bit more.
And I do wonder about, you know, sending out surveys to event hosts with their experiences to try and understand not just numerical participation, but like, who are your audiences? How did it go? What could we do differently? Again, we're adding birders should already have been involved in these events, but I guess the first step is reaching people who are already doing these things but don't know about it. And so that's going to be a huge change as well, involving Audubon and other bird groups as well. But yeah, and I just think more people knowing about these activities and providing these sort of collaborative ideas can help us understand, you know, what we can do next. I don't think I mentioned this. Oh, I did. 2018 is when it started. So it's been 6 years with some COVID years in between. So there's always, we're growing every year.
With a little
We're gonna have
Yeah.
to say, yeah, it's been 6 years minus 2.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Minus
Minus
1,
3.
or 1.5, or 3,
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Online want to
Questions on,
react or inquire?
questions in the chat, or just verbally go ahead.
I was gonna say, Tony shared again, like what Dena was talking about, the blog posts that are pop up once a month, usually have a data story built in that can be pulled from. I know I have like a slide deck of like interesting finds on iNat of like stories that people have told, or, you know, saved strands where people were debating about species and location and time of year and that kind of thing. One of the questions that I had sort of goes back to that data story, and thinking about the Sentinel sites specifically, and sort of having these hubs where multiple data streams are coming in from one location. When those locations were being developed, were they specific to the management decisions that are going to be needing to be made in that space? Okay, yeah, so maybe say a little more about that.
Yeah. They were not developed based on the management decisions. This is for the CDFW Climate Biodiversity Sentinel Site Network. We have 39 CDFW properties that have climate weather stations and biodiversity plots. And we're using a model that was created by actually the cannabis program to do ecological evaluations and long-term monitoring. And we've been sharing those methods with others, and like I mentioned, UC Reserves, they're also a big player, and they're trying to align in the same ways. But how it was decided was more based on making sure we had a diversity of habitats was sort of a primary one, getting it at different latitudes, elevations, and habitats across the state. Of course, there's a social factor too. Can we get to those sites? are there people there that are going to work with us to establish these sites, that can help us make sure we can fix things if something goes wrong? We have a field staff that literally drives around California for the entire field season, deploying and then retrieving these things. So that was a big piece of it too. But the idea is that it's sort of set up as an early warning system in a way, in terms of the long-term piece. And in the short term, we don't know what's on all of our properties. Right. And so by having these, we have 4 biodiversity plots at each property that is a Sentinel site. And we are discovering creatures that we didn't know existed. We're finding rare species. We detected mountain lions in an area of California that we didn't know there were mountain lions. There was some community reports of the mountain lions, but never an image until it could cross in front of our cameras. So that's sort of where it's being helpful. Baseline information that's scalable. Yeah, and that other people can participate in.
Were you gonna say something?
I was just on that, this is all done by CDFW staff or whoever owns the property is establishing these plots. But there really is opportunity for others to get involved in different kinds of ways. Like I mentioned with the Bobcat program, they took on volunteers to help go through all the camera data. And we use a platform called Wildlife Insights, which basically takes all the blanks and puts it aside for us, which is fantastic. But still, we have to go through every single image, and that takes time. So there's opportunity in that space for students or anyone to help go through those pictures. We are developing something called the Wildlife Sound Hub. It's not in use yet, but it's done just like Wildlife Insights, but for acoustic data. But still, you need to vet that information, and that's another place that probably community members can participate. In addition to, in the future, if we can get Audubon birding groups to these sites at certain times of the year to kind of fill in the biodiversity gaps, BioBlitzes, certain researchers coming out and asking certain questions. So there's a lot to do in that space. And something I didn't mention earlier, but the California Biodiversity Network is a public network that was born out of the California 30 by 30 initiative as sort of the science arm. And they have a roundtable called the Community Science Roundtable, where community members can come and think about really how you leverage these things, and that crosswalks with the Sentinel Site Network roundtable as well.
Oh my God, I was gonna say, I feel like I need a diagram.
Yeah, there's a website.
I'm sure there is. I was gonna ask, what is challenging currently for you that you'd like some thoughts about, or what are you wrestling with right now? One thing that occurs to me is you have so many things going on and so many overlapping parts and networks and platforms and databases and stuff like that. And so that, but you seem so calm, cool, and collected about it all that maybe it's not a challenge to deal with all of that. But I just wondered if you've got any, what would you like to, where do you want to be in 5 years? That kind of question.
Yeah, in terms of the data that's collected during Biodiversity Day or really any of these things, a better way to do that and communicate it back out, I think is important. And again, we're talking about, this collaboration is going to help make that happen in the next, hopefully 3 years, not 5 years. But just having a better sense and clearer stories and direction for the public to know, this is why this is important for you to participate. We're doing our best with what we know right now, but I'd like to make that clear, and to have really more people from different backgrounds and places in the state participating in different ways. I think is incredibly important.
What are your gaps right now in participation?
In participation, at most of California.
You get the usual spots.
We're trying to, like I said, it's all iterative. Trying right now to make sure we're reaching the audiences that are already engaged in some way so that they know about California Biodiversity Day. But then those are the people that already, care, and, obviously within those groups, they can help connect to local communities, and that's great. But, how do we get, Peggy, all the stuff that you work on, getting more information into schools, getting teachers more engaged, getting students more engaged? I feel like that is a huge piece. And of course, a lot of urban communities or even tribal communities that just might not be interested or know how to engage if they are. Just, I don't know, I mean, I think that's like the biggest thing. It's like literally like engagement beyond the people who already know what's going on.
Yeah.
Which I know you guys are all working on.
Or like changing the dynamic of, city, no nature.
Right.
Nature outside of cities. Like,
Yeah.
no, it's everywhere.
Right, exactly. There's a lot of people working on this issue, but I think working together is important.
I'm curious too, what approaches have been made to try to reach these groups? Have you been reaching out with surveys or emails? Like what have been the approaches? And maybe we could go from there as far as recommendations for different approaches.
Yeah, and I can only speak towards my experience with organizing California Biodiversity Day, and I'm sure I know CDFW in all their other various things like the NPA Watch, like they have their own way of doing it that has been really successful for engagement, but I can't speak to it. So there's other projects where that's happening. Again, I'm not part of it, so I can't speak to it as well. But since coming on at CDFW, it's first like bringing into that partnership planning group people who have communities that they can speak to. So it's kind of diversifying and broadening out the people who help plan the stuff to get it out there. This is our first year, directly working with the Climate Stewards, Climate Naturalist program. I know Allie's on the call here, and I feel like that's been a huge lift to work with you guys to get this message out more broadly. And really partnerships seem like, I know we're always saying this, but it's true. Like partnerships and collaboration is sort of, that's the tactic. Because we need to reach different audiences in different ways. Like I mentioned about birding, it's like, okay, we don't have birders engaged. How do we do that? So like I reached out to eBird. I found someone who is like up in eBird who has authority to tell other people that they should respond to my emails, and they did. And that's great. And they taught me, how to set this up, and we'll see how it goes this year. I'm not really sure. So I was trying to find the different groups that maybe hadn't been connected with before to get a little bit deeper there. We did work with our tribal coordinator at CDFW to put out some specific language around Biodiversity Day for tribes. Tried to do more like personalized emailing and requests, and that we have a lot to learn in that space and improve on and grow in. So that's another area that we're trying, we're interested in, but again, like partnerships is what's going to help us move forward. It's not like a here's where I think the gap is yet, because I feel like you all might have ideas that I haven't thought of for engaging.
Leveraging networks is time tested, and then what are I guess one question is what are the kind of less obvious networks that where there could be a cool connection, like other networks associated with extension, like 4-H or Master Gardeners is a lot of crossover. I don't know.
Master Gardeners.
4-H could be cool.
I do, when I see things, I have to stop myself. Like I see all these events happening across the state during that same time period. I'm like, I just want to tell everyone to know it's also this thing so that they can at least talk about it. But I have to stop myself because it's like everyone has to do their thing that they have to do. But ultimately, again, like it's kind of fundamentals. Like we need to want to connect. Like the word ecosystems, I feel like most people didn't know what that was or use that word generally like 10 years ago, but now, I don't know if you noticed, like there's been a shift. Like people know what ecosystems are. They know what climate change means. They don't really know what biodiversity means. So I feel like we're still working at these really like foundational levels to get that not to be scientific jargon.
One more question.
It was gone. It was so good what I had. I just feel like I think the thing that you are that like we basically work with 1 billion, give or take, groups that are collecting data, but may not actually have a scientist on the other end that is using it. And you guys are the giant ball of scientists who are actually using the data that all these people are collecting. So I feel like there's so much that you could do with getting the word out about how you're using the data, I guess. Is that just, and we all talk about like people are motivated to do this when they see that the data gets used and when they find out what kinds of impacts. Like a lot of people see this as conservation action. Doing science is conservation action, just right alongside planting trees and weeding weeds and things like that, right? They see this as the volunteer work that they can do to make a difference. And so when they hear the data is being used in really specific ways about things they care about, then they're like, oh, all right, you know, then they'll be. So anyway, I think that getting those stories out there about how you use the data and how it really makes a difference is a way to get more people in too.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd love to work with your team also to think about ways to do that. And I, you know, asking, I can't remember which one you asked me this, like, what would you like to have? No, actually, you did that. Yeah. It's like, what would you like to have in the next 5 years? Another one is giving back to the community of what they observed. I know you can go on iNaturalist and see that. I can share with you a link from last year. You can see what the top observations are, and that's cool.
Right.
But like, how do we make that more obvious?
And push it out and
yeah. I mean, like
Tony's link to the like blurbs and data stories and stuff is good. So we need if you like as an institution could put stuff out like that.
Yeah.
That would be really huge.
And with iNat on the phone, like can you watch what's happening for California Biodiversity Day and report on it in your blogs as well? And it would be a really great way to give back. Cal Academy in recent years has created like a flyer that says like, here are some cool observations that we're seeing, and that's a nice thing that we've had. But like, I mean, yeah, getting these things up on websites and newsletters, having iNaturalist Day, this many people participated, and these were the top 5 observations, like.
I think another thing, just adding to what Heidi said, is you guys, there's a lot of scientists at CDFW, but you're also the state. You're a managing agency. There are all these policies behind what you do that are rooted in kind of a sense of you know, public purpose. And so there's a little bit of like your tax dollars at work kind of thing going on here, which is different from say signing on to work with a university scientist who's monitoring this or that. There's a more direct connection to, if not the moment of action, at least the thing that is sort of institutionalized to like actively manage, foster, et cetera, as opposed to like a journal article. So how to kind of make that legible, because it's also bureaucratic and complicated. Noticing. So that's the downside of it.
Right. Yeah, and you know, so now we were talking about this earlier. We've done, CDFW has done community science, so we haven't like leveraged community science and communicated it, and that's what we're trying to do right now. We stood up a working group to discuss this and figure out what we can do internally and publicly. Always open to ideas and suggestions. So please reach out.
I was gonna say in the chat.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, Kate added, it would be interesting to figure out ways we can represent microorganisms and biodiversity monitoring networks.
Lots of information.
And then soil biodiversity white paper she shared, and I'll add that to the notes as well.
Yeah, I'm here. I sometimes represent myself better in writing than orally, but yeah, it's not necessarily the right place or moment, but I guess I'm trying to inoculate this idea, so to speak, but like how we can start to better include. I mean, it's a phenomenal amount of biodiversity that's very challenging and not often single organism oriented. But there is this report that a group of us put together for CDFA that starts to get at why below ground biodiversity is important, what are indicators for it, and some scenarios for monitoring what you might measure for whatever is the question that you're asking. And so trying to just spread it around a little bit, and a lot of work to get there to I see mushrooms are in iNaturalist. But, you know, mushrooms are acting like plants. So,
Right, yeah.
I just want to uplift what you're saying, because that report is awesome. If anyone has seen it, if you haven't seen it,
I'm like,
please
I
have a
didn't
look.
know, I'm so excited to read
Yeah,
it.
as
Great.
you know, I was very excited to see it, and I think that's a great question, and I'd be happy to continue that conversation to see like how can we work together to find ways that communities can think more about soil diversity.
I was gonna say Cal EDNA would be
Yes.
so cool to link with this.
Yeah.
Then you
Yeah.
can get a bigger picture, not just through iNaturalist.
Yeah.
I was saying, University of Oklahoma had their What's in Your Backyard, where you could send in soil samples, and then, I don't think that one's up and running anymore, but I can,
But it's a model of what you do in
yeah,
California.
I had done it with classroom students, and you get, you know, like full feedback.
And I did do stuff, the Natural History Museum in London had a whole project called Microverse, where they had school kids collect, they had a whole little protocol where the kids collected samples of swabbing buildings and also I think soils, and then submitted it, but they had this major lag in getting the data back to the students, right, in time for that same school year of kids to get the data. So there's so much potential with kids in micro biodiversity, but the timelines for the analysis become kind of
Yeah.
and I think tech has improved since then.
And it's
Right.
difficult to interpret, you know, the microbiome sort of output is challenging to communicate it in a succinct way, partly because we're learning a lot about it still. But I would love to follow up with anyone who would, I know, Jonathan, this is close to your heart too.
Yeah, he put a testify in the chat.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd love to think about it.
I'm here too, Kate, and yes, I would love to follow up. We've been struggling with this, and I think it's really important, and we've tried dozens of different strategies to try and engage citizen scientists in microbial studies, and it's not clear exactly what the best strategy is, but I want to keep working on it. So
And maybe burying underpants, you know.
yeah, I mean,
how long it takes to degrade underpants. You know, there's like functional diversity.
For people
like
that didn't know what that was a reference to.
And it's men's
protocol.
Not a metaphor.
It's men's cotton underpants. You don't bury
Right.
women's. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
well, the
Protocol.
organism I did a lot of my PhD on was originally isolated when they irradiated underpants as part of World War II sterilization
Right.
processes.
Oh my God. Oh,
The
hilarious.
ways that we could engage middle school students around this are many. But I think it's time, right?
Yeah,
And so I think we should all follow, I think we should follow up, anybody maybe on microbial blah, 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 like we should probably have that conversation. That sounds
Yeah.
really good.
I'd love to be involved, and I have, you know, I'm retired. Sort of.
Yay!
Love it.
Sort of. Yeah. So, but I have more time.
Which means that you actually can engage with this rather than you can't.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well,
Cool.
thank you everyone for being here. I just wanted to wrap things up and also make a plug for some future Collabinar events that we have scheduled. September 25th, YN Kwan, I think, is on the call today. Thanks for coming. She's gonna talk about various obstacles and DEI issues that she encountered in community science as an adult informal learner from groups underrepresented in STEM. So we're really excited to have that conversation, and YN also added a note in the chat about a future Collabinar we're hoping to schedule for November with the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County about teaching community science through basic data analysis of iNaturalist data using R. So we're gonna have a couple great events, but thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining.